How to access the Emergency Response Data Platform. Any public safety agency can access life-saving emergency data through the RapidSOS Emergency Response Data Platform. There are two ways of doing so. RapidSOS Portal is a powerful web-based tool that enables you to manage emergencies and access location and supplemental data for every call in your jurisdiction. Signing up for RapidSOS Portal is easy and only takes a few minutes. In addition to emergency management tools and data, RapidSOS Portal includes a training platform as well as administrative tools to manage user permissions, track usage, and analyze trends in your agency. To learn more and sign up for RapidSOS Portal, please visit rapidsosportal.com. RapidSOS also integrates with every major CAD, CPE, mapping, or other public safety softwares. With an integration, you can receive RapidSOS data through your existing workflow, and you won't need any additional screens, tabs, or windows. To learn more about integrations, visit rapidsos.com/public-safety-partners.
Hey heroes, welcome to the 2024 Winter and Spring ENP Study Group through On Scene First. This is week 3 in the live session. This week we're going to go over types and features. So a little bit of information here, and just to let you know that some of the things that we're going to talk about today, we are going to talk about later. We're just going to introduce them today. So with that, I'd just like to go over a few housekeeping things. And so first, if you are joining us on the YouTube channel and you have stumbled across this video, we are doing a live study group session for the 2024 winter and spring. So the February and April study group, the winter and spring ENP exam. And then we'll do another live session later in the year. But this live session has started on October 6th and will continue on to January 19th, 2024. And so if you are watching this video during that time frame and you would like to be added to the live study group where you can get access to the Google group and the Google Drive that has all of the information, the PDFs, MP3s, some practice exams, and any other materials that I provide, just go ahead to the website. You can use the QR code there to the left, or go to my website, and that's onscene1st.com/training/study ENP. If you have registered during this study group time and you have not received access to the Google group or the calendar invite, and you're just happening to find these, just shoot an email to the email you see there, info@onscenefirst.com, and just ask to have it checked. What happens sometimes is municipalities will block the emails that are coming, so you can work with my assistant Jenny and determine how come you're not getting the access to that. She might need a non-government email to take care of that. If you're watching this after January 19th and you are scheduled to take the February exam or the April exam, and you would like to have access to this particular live sessions materials, you can do so by going to that same website. The QR code is the same, but the onscenefirst.com/training/study ENP. And on there, it will give you the opportunity to request access to the materials from this live session. So those will be available up until the next testing period, which will be the summer or fall, when we will not allow access to the old materials anymore. And then the next live study group will start on March 8th. And if you are not ready to take the exam and you do want to join that particular study group, just go on to my website, onscenefirst.com, subscribe to the newsletter and you'll get notified when the link for the next session gets put up so you can register there. So there's that. Oops. All right. Also, just want to say that we're wicked excited to be partnering with the National Number Association in Ontario, Canada. And if you would like more information on the NINA Ontario ENP stuff and what they offer to their folks, you can scan that QR code. But just know that at some point during our study session, there are going to be some folks from the NINA Ontario joining our study group to go over the Canada information for the exam. I want to say thank you to our premier sponsor of the study group, Rapid SOS. They have generously sponsored us as the premier sponsor since day one. They will be continuing on into 2024, so I'm super excited about that. If you have not put this technology in your 911 center, I say it every single time I talk about them. And it's not just because I worked there and had the honor of helping to build the technology that's there. It really is life-saving technology, and it would be beyond a shame if you were not utilizing it in your center. So they have been generously sponsoring this study group so it can continue to happen. So if you see any of those folks, make sure you say thank you. And then as far as our scholarships go, On Scene First has right now, we have 7 scholarships to award to folks that are registered into this particular study group. The 7 scholarships will be given away for the winter of 2024 ENP exam. That covers the exam fee of $435. And we do have several applications in place already. So if you are going to apply, make sure you get on there and do so. I'll show you that link in just a second. But I want to say thank you to these sponsors. So Rapid SOS, as part of their premier sponsorship, offers 2 of those scholarships. Responder Services Consulting has is supporting a scholarship, and LB Comms is supporting 2 of those. So just want to say a huge thank you to those folks. We appreciate their support more than they'll ever know. So if you do want to submit for the scholarship, just know that there are some criteria that you have to meet. First and foremost, your agency cannot have the opportunity to pay for your exam. So this is, I chose to do this exam scholarship for the folks that are having to pay out of their own pocket to take the exam. So there is other criteria there, but just head on over to onscenefirst.com/scholarship or scan the QR code up in the right-hand corner that you see on your screen, and the applications will be accepted until December 8th. And it is competitive. I've already seen a few of the applications where when the question is asked, like, kind of what do you hope to do with this certification? Advance my career is one sentence is not going to get you into the running to get that. So be thoughtful in your answers. That actually makes it much easier for us to be able to have some folks to choose from. So thank you to our sponsors for that. I also want to share some information on some other scholarships. The Texas NINA chapter, the Tennessee NINA chapter, TINA, and 911 Wonder Woman also have scholarships that are available. So Texas and Tennessee, you have to be a part of their organization. So if you are a member of the Texas NINA or the Tennessee NINA chapters, head on over there. They also have some scholarships, and the criteria is listed there for all of those scholarships. I don't have that information off the top of my head, but just wanted to make sure that you guys knew that there were other scholarships available to take the exam as well. So there you go. So we're going to jump in and talk about types and features of the 911 system. Just to reiterate also, I do not follow the body of knowledge or the study guide. There's a method to my madness as to what order I go in. when it comes to delivering the material. Over time, I found that certain pieces of information go well in this section because they need to be introduced, or it doesn't make sense to separate something out when I'm starting to go over it somewhere else. So just keep that in mind. What I am going to do that is a little bit different than what I have done in the past is, once this week is finished, I have a body of knowledge in PDF form where I am highlighting the things that we have already covered. So you would be able to look at that body of knowledge that is uploaded to the Google Drive folder and see what has been covered. If you're not sure if there's a particular topic you're looking for, you can see that we've either covered it or we haven't covered it yet, and that we would be covering it. So that's something new that I'm going to be doing because I think it just makes sense. So we'll first start with the types of 911 systems. So back in the day, we talked about in week one, where back in 1957, the National Fire Chiefs Association said we should have one phone number for folks to call in an emergency. Later, one of the phone providers decided that they were going to make this possible with 911 being that universal number. And then the first 911 call was made in Haleyville, Alabama on February 16th, 1968. So I do know that that is one of the questions. Sometimes folks get it, sometimes they don't. So you should probably know where the first 911 call was made and when. Basic 911 is just that. It super basic. When folks would call 911 in their jurisdiction, more often than not, it would land on a phone that looks very similar to the one you see here. I actually have one on my wall over there that was given to me when I retired out of the 911 center. From my fire chief had found it in the fire station and they put it on a plaque. So that was kind of cool. But the basic 911 system is just that, right? So an emergency system that automatically connects 911 callers to a designated answering point. And boy, have we come far since then. The call routing is determined by the originating central office only. So if you remember, I think it was last week, we talked about the central office, the end office, the class 5 office. But nonetheless, 911 call gets placed. It goes to the central office, and then it is transferred to the 911 system that is attached to that central office. So pretty much basically it's within its own jurisdiction, right? Interconnection to other telephone service providers is not possible because it's not a tandem environment. And if you remember, again, last week or the week before, I'm losing track of my weeks, but we talked about the tandem equipment that would allow that pass off that would go from the central office into another telephone service provider's area. So we're not placing a 911 call in this jurisdiction and it automatically being transferred to another jurisdiction. Very basic. It was voice only, and it may or may not support alley. And that's kind of a misunderstanding from folks that when we move to enhanced 911, you received Annie and Allie, and that's actually not. It's not that simple. There's more to the enhanced 911 piece, which we'll talk about in just a few slides. But basic 911 may actually support Annie and Allie. It's just not going to be as advanced as we're seeing today, right? So when we talk about Annie and Allie, as sad as this is, I'm going to break down Big Al and Little Annie. Mana Wallace from the Massachusetts State 911 Department taught my 911 class 1996 when I was a baby dispatcher. And I will just always remember her differentiating between the Annie and the Allie by calling it Big Al and Little Annie. Little Annie meaning just the phone number. So it's just small in nature. And Big Al is the bigger screen that has more information on it. So Annie being the telephone number that's associated with the call origination, and then Allie, automatic location information, displays at the PSAP the caller's telephone number, the address and location, um, supplemental emergency services, which we'll talk about in a few slides, and then information on where the call originates. So the screen you see to the left, that's obviously the Allie screen. And I will tell you, it is good for me to review these things, because when I was with Rapid SOS and I would reach out to folks and ask them for screenshots of things, there were times that I would ask for Allie screens if I could get a screenshot of an Allie screen for a particular vendor, and folks didn't always know what I meant by Allie screen. So it's about your training and what you've been exposed to, and how in depth your training was. I never realized the lack of training on phone systems that there is in some places until I started my training of call handling, et cetera. The look on some folks' faces when I talk about some of the things that we're going to talk about today is baffling to me. So make sure you know your Annie and Allie screens and all of the information that is accessible on there, and how to find it. One call just as recently as 2 years ago, that I had to kind of dissect for something that I'm working on with an agency. The call taker could not tell a field responder where the service provider, or who the service provider was, meaning AT&T. They said that they weren't able to access that information from their screen. And again, I don't know if sometimes there's a lack of understanding of what they're asking or how they're asking, but nonetheless, you need to know your Allie screens, not only for the exam, just for the job in general. So then there was a basic with Annie Allie. And so this came along right after just the basic solutions. It was the first major advancement to 911. And that was the use of CAMA to move that call through the system. So CAMA stands for Centralized Automatic Message Accounting. So I'm sure you've heard the term CAMA trunks. And that's kind of referring to pieces of that network. Just so you know, we are going to go further into CAMA in another session, but to differentiate between basic and basic with Annie Allie, one of those changes is implementing CAMA trunks, CAMA type calling. Now, I do recall this being on my exam, and the differentiation point, when did CAMA come into play? It was originally used for toll calling. So if you remember when I was talking about how the call would get through the public switch telephone network, et cetera, we needed to implement, or they needed to implement CAMA to be able to measure a few things. So number one, it's going to capture the phone number. So when it captures the phone number, it will tell them, yes, you have permission to make a long distance call. Or you don't, and we're just going to charge you whatever the going rate is. So capturing that phone number to be able to identify what phone provider and service you have. And then how long was the call? So again, to be charged for toll calling, they need the phone number. They need to know how long the call was, and it will route the call to wherever it needs to go. So if I was going to call my Aunt Linda, remember after 9 p.m., you would call it because you would get a cheaper rate. Never understood that, but it is what it is. And then so CAMA was what made that possible for the call to go from my central office into somebody else's, which again, remember, we referred to those as LATAs, LATA, local access telecommunications, whatever. My brain's fried at the moment. Basic 911 with Allie, it evolved to capture the name and address. And it was done by, so basically what happens, again, a lot of folks don't understand this process. So I want to break it down for you, is there is an assumption that when the additional data, the address and the name of the subscriber comes in on the Alley, it is coming in at the time of the call. And that's not actually what's happening. It's attached to the phone number. So when the phone number hits the system first, that phone number is then what we refer to as parsed out. It's taken out and it's wrapped in a data message. And basically that data message gets sent to an Alley database that is usually maintained by the telephone service provider. And that database, and again, we're going to talk more about databases when we get to the database section, but it takes that phone number, it wraps it in a message, like message in a bottle, message wrapped around a telephone number, sends it out to the Alley database, says, hey, check your database for this phone number. Do you have any name and address that is associated with this phone number? It'll say yes, and then it will bring that information into your 911 center. I will tell you that a lot of agencies went right from basic to enhanced, because this step in the middle was just this little blip in time, right? And so unless you were really up on it and moving forward quickly with your 911 stuff, usually those are the forward thinkers, et cetera, the disruptors, the folks that are leading the charge when it came to implementation of any new technology. But for the most part, many agencies went right from basic to enhanced. I know that's what we did here in the state of Massachusetts. But some folks think that because Annie and Allie is present, it has now become enhanced 911, and that's not the case. So big note here, basic 911 with Annie and Allie is not enhanced. So all right, enhanced 911. There are going to be several different components that take it from basic with Annie Alley or basic to enhanced 911. And basically the minor definition here is a telephone system that includes network switching, database, and public safety answering point premise elements that are capable of providing the following or allowed to do the following. So number one has to provide Annie and Alley. Number two, the big thing that comes with enhanced 911, which you will see on the exam, is the selective router. The selective router being a piece of equipment that is located in one of the central offices that will allow that call to be transferred wherever it needs to go. There is also the need for selective and fixed transfer. We'll talk a little bit more about that. An alternate and default routing. And the alternate and default routing could be a little confusing, but I'm going to break it down for you very simply. So just know you will see some information on alternate routing and default routing, and you really need to peel back the layers as to looking at the scenario that they're describing to figure out which one it's going to fall into, because their definitions are very similar, but they are different. So we will break those down. Generally speaking, and it also has, as you notice in that first definition, it said the word database. So there's a couple of databases that are necessary. But generally speaking, enhanced 911 has three components that basic 911 does not have. So first, Master Street Address Guide, the ESN, an emergency service number, and the selective routing database, the SRDB. Now, with that said, I'm going to reiterate here, you need to know your acronyms. If I'm giving you an acronym, you should probably know what those acronyms are. A bunch of folks are passing the exam right now, which I'm really happy about. We are in a testing period as we're doing this live session. So lots of folks are reaching out to let me know that they have passed their exam. And a few folks have already indicated the necessity of knowing the acronym because they are not spelling out um, all the words. Okay. So there is that. Just realized didn't put my glasses back on. Was wondering why things were a little blurry. Oh, that's much better. So when it comes to Enhanced 911, I'm just throwing this back out here. I know that it was in a few different places, is that the selective routing is the key and switching it from basic to enhanced. So Enhanced 911 added the ability to selectively route based on location and provides the caller's callback number and location. So there's a lot more, but if you notice, while it sounds very simple in nature, there's a few pieces that are needed to be able to do that. So the master street address guide, the ESN, the selective routing database. Well, where's this call going to go based on that ESN number? So lots of components, but this is to break it down very, very simply. We're going to talk about the voice over internet protocol. Now, after this section, we're just going to jump over wireless and we're going to jump over NG911 because those two topics have their own section. They are much more in depth. So while you would think that the natural progression would be to go to wireless, in reality, voice over internet protocol was arriving in 911 centers about the time that wireless devices were too. So if you're thinking we're going to go in order, they were around the same time. But if you were a rural agency, you may not have seen any type of VoIP stuff for quite a while after wireless. So there's that. So voice over internet protocol is an internet protocol, IP, internet protocol term for a set of capabilities used to manage and deliver a voice information over the internet. And so when I'm doing a live session, and this is a recorded session without an audience, so I don't have anybody to chat to at the moment, but I'll often ask, do you remember or do you know what year voice over internet became an issue for us in 911? Well, it was in 1995. And like I said, so I started in 96, but I didn't start seeing any type of VoIP issues until probably the early 2000s. So it was introduced, but we weren't seeing it wreak havoc. And when I say wreak havoc, I mean wreak havoc. It's still wreaking havoc, actually. It's just wreaking havoc in a different way. And we'll talk about that at some point too. So as far as VoIP goes, VoIP is a telephony term, a telephony term, for a set of capabilities used to manage the delivery of voice communications over internet. The voice communications are now sent in digital form. There are call servers, which are computers, versus our switching networks. So it's going to move through our systems a little bit differently. And again, that's where some of these issues are happening. Because for a long time, the FCC had nothing to do with regulating these types of calls. They do now have a say, and they are regulating how these calls are moving through the network and things that they have to provide. I'm going to get a little bit further later into what a uniform resource identifier is, but just know it has to do with the packets of data, how they're sent through the internet. So that means that a phone number is not a must for a VoIP system to call 911. But in that case, they're going to need a URI, a Uniform Resource Identifier. And we'll get into that a little bit later. The voice, a VoIP service provider, a VSP, is a company that offers VoIP telecommunication services that may be used to generate a 911 call and interconnect with a 911 network. They are also referred to as interconnected VoIP service providers. So some folks, and just to be clear, especially if you're, kind of new in the profession. I know that you have to be in the profession for 3 years before you take the exam. But again, there's some terms that folks will throw out there and they just get assumed. But I have heard folks refer to VoIP as voice over interconnected protocol. And that's not actually the definition of VoIP. It's voice over internet protocol. But the VoIP service providers could be referred to as interconnected VoIP service providers, meaning they're interconnecting them into the 911 network. So some of them that you see, Vocaltel, Vonage, Nextivia, these were some of the front runners. I will never forget when Vonage first came out. That was one of the first ones that we saw where we were having the VoIP issues. And if you've been around a long time, you know that this was a big problem. We don't see it as much today because people are using these versus taking their phone with them. So if we had somebody, this is what would happen in Massachusetts. We have snowbirds. So they don't like the snow. So they go south for the winter. So they spend 4 or 5 months, 6 months out of the year down in Florida. When Vonage and the like started coming out, folks could literally take their hardwired phone out of the wall and go to Florida and plug it in down there. And it would keep the same phone number. The problem is that the address associated with that phone would and the service would still be associated with the address that they have it registered to. And so if somebody from my town here in Rochester took their little phone and drove down to Florida and plugged it into their condo down there and picked up the phone and placed a 911 call, that call based on the phone number and the location associated with the phone number would come back to Rochester. And so we did run into issues where if the address was not being verified and there was an assumption made that the alley was correct, a location issue was definitely going to be a problem. So there's a fire across the street from me. What's the address? 123 Main Street, Rochester, Mass. That is why I am beyond a stickler for folks verifying the jurisdiction that they are in. And we'll talk about that later too. But that was one of the biggest problems that we were seeing with voice over internet. And so whenever Vonage commercial would come on, the do, I would say Vonage sucks. And my daughter was about 3 years old at this time. And I just remember her hearing the commercial one day and saying Vonage sucks. And the reason why Vonage sucks is because we were having so many issues with callers calling 911 and not being where they were supposed to be. So just keep that in mind. This has been around for a long time. The problems we're seeing today are very different than the problems we were seeing before, and we'll get into that. So our FCC has created some rules that go around VoIP service providers. Back in the day, way back then, they did not have to provide 911 services, which was mind-blowing to me. They did not have to provide 911 services, and they had a opt-out service where they charged extra for folks to have the capability to dial 911. Again, mind-blowing. And I remember when I was first teaching for a training company back in 2006, there are a few calls that I played where folks were in a situation. One in particular was a home invasion where they picked up the phone to call 911 and it said, your phone can't dial 911. And so the daughter ran to another phone. Your phone can't dial 911. So we recognized that this was becoming a problem. So the FCC had to step in, just like they're going to have to do regarding apps that are calling 911. So right now, the FCC is not regulating any type of app that is claiming to call 911, but they will have to eventually, because we're gonna run into some issues just like we did with VoIP. So here are some of the rules that are associated with VoIP. You don't need to know all of these. Just know that they're here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but the bottom line is the two major things that, or three, I'm going to just ad lib the three major things that we have to know is number one, the VoIP company has to provide 911 services and it can't be an extra charge. Number two, they have to route the call to the most appropriate 911 center with the accurate information. The problem with the accurate information is the information is only as accurate as what the user of the phone is going to put in there, right? So the VoIP folks can say, yeah, we totally we totally transferred it to the right place based on the information that was entered. But then the third major component is they have to have an easy way for the caller to change that location. Wireless, more to come on that later. We have a whole section. And then just briefly, next generation 911 is, by definition, a secure IP-based open standard system comprised of hardware, software, data, and operational policies and procedures. We're going to do more on that later, so we'll unpack that. There's a lot of new terminology that comes with next generation 911 and a lot of misconceptions that we will clear out. As far as the features of the 911 system go, let's jump into those. So we mentioned the selective router, and again, there's going to be places where it's going to come up again, especially when we talk about how the phone call moves through the 911 system, both pre next gen and post next gen. I will reiterate, selective routing is the big differentiator between basic and enhanced 911. Selective routing is when the 911 calls are routed based on the street address of the caller. So when you think about it, we're going back to the days where we didn't have cell phones and it was the physical street address that was associated with the billing, that was associated with the phone call. And that's where the master street address guide comes in. It basically says Tracy Eldridge lives at this address and this is her phone number. And it would go from the phone service into the into the MSAG, the master street address guide. And it would live there waiting for a 911 call, that Annie telephone number, to grab the phone number, wrap it in the question, the data package, and ask that MSAG for the address that is associated with this phone number. And then it would deliver it back to the 911 center. The selective router cannot understand addresses. So here's where the ironic part is, right? It is based on the addresses, but it can't actually understand the address. So every address in the MSAG is associated with an emergency service zone number. Okay. Emergency service number, which lives inside of an emergency zone. And we'll talk more about that. There is then selective transfer, is the capability of automatically transferring a 911 call to a response agency by operation of one of the several buttons typically designed as police, fire, and emergency medical based on the ESN of the caller. Now, if you look on the bottom of your alley, I say bottom because that's where it was in mine, and I'll show you that in just a few slides. Somewhere on the alley, it's going to say EMS and it will list a town, EMS, and then it will list police, it'll list a town. Fire, it will list a town. Those differentiations are identified by an ESN number, emergency service number. And basically it says if the phone number from this address comes into our 911 system, you're either going to send it here or here. And so I'll get a little bit more into that ESN and depth in just a couple more slides. So that selective transfer, let me just go back for a second. Oops, wrong one. That selective transfer is happening behind the scenes. So it is selectively transferring that call before you may even see it. So if you have it set up that if it's an EMS call and it is coming in, it might automatically go to where it needs to go based on your phone system. Okay. All right. And now we have a fixed transfer. A fixed transfer is a service that allows an established 911 call to be transferred by the PSAP attendant, call taker, to another PSAP based on whatever information. So when you answer the phone, 911, do you need police, fire, or medical? If they say medical and you transfer that to somebody else, that's going to be a fixed transfer. You're going to select a button from kind of a special key, and it's going to send that call where it needs to go. And there's no need for you to dial that number. And fixed transfers, it's kind of like a speed dial, right? And so you can select who you have on that drop down list. One of the things that I did, and I'll throw this out there, is if you have a place where you have fixed transfer buttons, before I left my 911 center and we were building out our next gen phone system, the state 911 department asked who I wanted listed or what fixed transfer categories that I want. And I actually titled one ECRC, Emergency Call Relay Centers. We'll talk about those in just a little bit, but so Northern 911, the Entrado call center, any place that is going to have the ability to transfer a 911 call to me, I wanted them on a one button kind of transfer. So if I needed to get information from them, I was able to do that very quickly. As mentioned, the Master Street Address Guide is a database of street names and house number ranges with their associated communities, defining the emergency service zone and their associated emergency service numbers to enable proper routing of 911 calls. We're going to cover this a little more depth in the database section as to what type of database this is and what it does for 911. But again, the ESZ is the zone, so the jurisdiction that the ESNs live in. So when we talk about those ESNs, it is a number that the selective router can understand. Now remember, the selective router cannot understand addresses, which is weird, but it's based on address, but it can't understand the address. So it needs to break it down into a 3 to 5 digit number that represents the emergency service zone. So the zone in which that number lives in. An ESN is defined as, there's two types. The first one is administrative. It's the facilities dispatching the proper public safety agency. And then a routing ESN is an administrative ESN assigned to each MSAG range to associate the physical address with the zone. So when I say administrative and it facilitates dispatching the proper agency, this is actually what our alley screen looked like when it came to the dispatching of the services. And it was funny because when I requested this of the new agency, they were always curious as to why it said, Freetown Rescue or Wareham Rescue under ambulance services. The reason why I did that when I was in my center is I split our town into 2 emergency service zones by having 2 emergency service numbers. And I did that because we were a basic EMS service and we had to notify paramedics from a neighboring town based on nature of the call through EMD and based on that location. So I wanted to make it easier for my telecommunicators to be able to just look at the alley screen and say, okay, based on 1099 Walnut Plain Road, when that call comes in on Walnut Plain Road, it's automatically going to display which ambulance service we needed ALS from. And so you can request other ESN numbers. It just can't be a number that somebody else has, because if that ESN number is the same as somebody else's, then the call is going to get routed there, or it's going to get confused and go somewhere like Northern 911 in Canada or the Intrado call center. So, which we'll talk about. So, yeah, I hope this makes it clear, is that ESN is going to basically dictate, one, where that call is going to go. So when you're verifying your information, when you're going through your information as it pertains to discrepancy reporting, you should know what your ESN number is. So I know that one of ours was 356. I can't remember what the new one was because we didn't use it for that long before I left. But you should know what your ESN number is, because if a call gets misrouted to you, one of the things you should be checking is, did somebody fat finger the keys for the ESN number? So when a call comes to you that doesn't belong to you, a red flag needs to go up. You need to scratch your head and say, why did this call come to me? And you need to kind of troubleshoot it. And the first thing that I would tell my folks to do is make sure the ESN number is correct. Because if our ESN number was 356 and the people that, we make errors and transpose numbers, if instead of 356, they put in 365 and that call came to me by accident, it's not actually the address. So where you would think that the address is what's dictating that call to go to the 911 center, it's not the address, it's the ESN number. And humans are the ones that are going to enter the ESN numbers that are associated with those particular addresses, or they were way back when. I don't know if they've advanced that technology. However, it was very easy for somebody to transpose those numbers. So if a call came to you that shouldn't have, you need to tell somebody about it. And then the emergency service zone is a geographic zone served by police, fire, and EMS agencies. Each ESZ contains a set of street addresses served by those 3 agencies, and the ESZ is assigned up to 5 digits that the selective router can use to route the call to the appropriate PSAP. These numbers are called ESN numbers, okay? So ESN number lives inside the ESN zone. ESZ, sorry. As mentioned for Enhanced 911, there also has to be an SRDB, Selective Router Database. And again, know your acronyms. The best way for you to learn your acronyms is through using Quizlet. Tons of folks in more and more are doing it because I think sometimes when folks are creating those card sets for the flashcard type of things, it's helping them reinforce the information that they need, which I think is great. Just be careful. Some of the things are not correct. So if you think something doesn't make sense or is wonky, definitely look it up on your own. But for the most part, they're pretty spot on, especially when it comes to learning the acronyms, because the good part is you can request different ways of how that information gets presented to you. So it could be in flashcards, it can be fill in the blanks, it can be they give you the definition and you need to know the word, and you do the flashcards until you know what the answer is. And if you answer enough right, it will take it out of that slide deck until you're down to like, a 3 or 4 that you just can't seem to get, and they keep repeating them. So it's a great program. But the Selective Routing Database, the SRDB, is associated with the E91 selective router that can translate a phone number, a telephone number, TN, to an ESN. So it's the selective router database that actually turns the address into that ESN. But the address is actually coming from the MSAG, the Master Street Address Guide. And then the selective router database is what translates it into an ESN number. And then the ESN number is used to route the call in the emergency service zone. Call transferring, just that, the capability of redirecting the call to another party. There's something called a router to router transfer. This is going to sneak through the system. This is probably, you're not going to see this a lot, but it's basically when 2 different 911 system selective routers have the ability to transfer a call to each other. Okay. If one of them gets a phone call that's not native to their selective router, it has a list of the codes to say, hey, this isn't my call. And it will send it behind the scenes to the selective router of the place where it's supposed to go. So it will send the other selective router, send it to the other selective router, and then that selective router will send it to the PSAP. Geospatial router. Again, this is the first time you're being introduced to emergency call routing function, which is a next generation 911 term, which replaces the selective router. So ECRF, you're going to see this again, and I'm going to break this down for you with pictures and charts and images and all that. But the use of the emergency call routing function in the next gen 911 environment and GIS, graphical information systems, data to route a 911 call, an emergency call, to the appropriate PSAP or emergency service provider based on the civic location or geographic coordinates provided with the call. We're seeing this a lot more. We're seeing agencies that are, moving to the next gen environment where that call is being sent via the actual address, the physical address, or the GIS coordinates, okay, the longitude and latitude, which makes sense, right? So we are seeing more accurate, well, let me rephrase that. We are seeing more accurate locations that are coming from the network for different reasons. So our phase 2s are getting better. And then obviously we have the rapid SOS location, but we're having better statistics with the call actually getting to the right PSAP based on the latitude and longitude of the call versus utilizing a tower, right? So before, it doesn't matter kind of where I am, the call would go to the tower, the closest tower that was appropriate, and then the tower would deliver that to the jurisdiction. So we had calls that were going to the wrong place. Today, this is getting better with geospatial routing because the next gen environment is capable of sending it to the PSAP in which it belongs to based on those coordinates. Policy-based routing, we will talk more about. Policy-based router is a technique that forwards and routes data package based on policies and filters. So basically the call will go here in this form based on this. So if this, then that, just like a regular policy would, right? So if this happens, if this is going through the network this way, it's going to be moved through the system this way. And this is where it's going to go based on this information that we're gathering. And we'll do more on that later. Another feature is the ANI resend or rebid. So this is just one of the alley screens that I captured, this RTX retransmit. Sometimes folks call it resend, rebid, transmit, retransmit. whatever it is that you're calling it. If the initial ANI information is wonky, okay, wonky is a technical term that I use, and you need to get proper ALI to return, you may need to hit the retransmit or the rebid button. Most phone systems have a button to manually rebid. However, a lot of agencies will set it to automatically rebid every 30 seconds, generally every 30 seconds. But here's where the problem lies. Misconception is folks think that by clicking the retransmit button, it's going to bring back information quicker. It is not. The systems, the networks are set up that you can only bring back another location in 30 seconds. That's why when the Rapid SOS portal came out and that location was updating automatically every 3 to 5 seconds, it was a big game changer. I do want to reiterate this information. Clicking on that button does nothing if 30 seconds has not passed. It's just like a morphine drip, right? So they give you the button and they say, you can release the morphine anytime you want. And you're like, click, 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 and nothing's coming, right? So please keep that in mind. Know the way your system works. Is it automatically retransmitting every 30 seconds? If it is, that's one less button that you have to worry about and hit. Is that if it's going to update, it's going to come in automatically. Or if you do know that it is you and it has to be manual, just excessively clicking on it is not going to do anything because the network is only going to allow every 30 seconds. That's why you need to have the portal. 911 direct trunking. It implies that the 911 call routes through the originating service serving central office directly to the PSAP. So it's not going through a selective router. So if I'm in this town and the call is going right to my central office and then into my 911 center, it's going to be 911 direct trunking. And I am going to continue on. I know we're probably going to go over the hour and a half, but I'm not holding anybody here. So you can watch it if you want. If not, you can come back and check it out later. But I'm not going to stop just to stop. So alternate routing and default routing. There are a few different questions and they're worded differently on the exam from what I remember. And this was something I just didn't get. I couldn't figure out a way to identify what the difference was between alternate routing and default routing, because when you look at the definition by definition, they are very similar. So it took me a while, but I now have it. I have it down and I'm going to pass this on to you because again, if you can get these 2 or 3 questions right on this particular thing, well, that's 2 or 3 questions that you can get wrong somewhere else, right? So alternate routing is the capability of routing 911 calls to a designated, meaning we've picked it in advance, alternate location. If all 911 trunks are busy or out of service, it may be activated upon request or automatically if detectable when the 911 equipment fails or the PSAP itself is disabled. So the reason why I have this playbill over here is because I want you to think of alternate. So when you were in a play as a kid, there was the lead and then there was an alternate. So in this play, the lead is Billy Bad Guy and the alternate is Joey Bag of Donuts, right? And so the alternate, we've already identified who the alternate is. So based on the situation, that 911 call knows where to go. We've already designated it. It's been predetermined that if there is a problem, that call cannot get physically into my 911 center in Rochester. We have already predetermined that our alternate is going to be the Marion Police Department. So here's my stage, okay? So Marion Police Department is pre-designated as the alternate to the town of Rochester. So if our phone system goes down, if our building catches on fire, if we are being inundated with calls and we only have 2 we have 4 trunks that are coming in, but 1 dispatcher on, we're not answering, and those calls have to roll somewhere after so many rings. The alternate is also the understudy, right? So they've been training their entire life to be able to perform when Rochester breaks a leg. And so Rochester breaks a leg, that phone call is automatically going to go to our alternate. Okay. This seems pretty simple, right? So alternate, it's predetermined. If something goes wonky with my 911 system, the calls are automatically, or we could send them over there. So there was a time where we were having a problem with static on our line and calls kept disconnecting. Well, until you figure out what that problem is, I do not want a chance having an issue. So while the Verizon folks were on site, we directed our 911 calls over to Marion. So we can do it automatically when the phone system says, hey, there's something wonky, or we can do it manually. Okay, so automatic or manually. Now, default routing. If you look at the definition, it kind of looks the same, right? So the capability to route a 911 call to a designated default. Now, the difference is a designated default is not, we're not picking when the call is going to go there. No matter what, it's automatically going to go there, but I may not know who the default is. So it says designated default because there are a handful of what are emergency call relay centers that are designated to catch this call. The key difference is the call doesn't actually know where to go. So when you look at alternate routing, the 911 call knows where to go. It's coming to Rochester, but there's a roadblock that says the call can't get in there. I don't know why, but maybe the phone system's down, it's being inundated. Again, building's on fire, whatever. The roadblock says, we know this call is going to Rochester, but we can't get in. That's alternate routing. Send it to the alternate. In default routing, it's designated to one of the default catch-alls, one of the places that is designed to catch any misfit 911 calls, the calls that they don't know where to go. So the capability to route a 911 call to a designated default PSAP when the incoming 911 call cannot be selectively routed due to any failure or other cause. Now, there is a whole slew of reasons why a call may not know where to go. And I'm going to give you an example so we can break it down. So if I asked you, where is this caller located? So this caller, according to the alley screen, is located at 30 Braintree Hill Park, floor 1, Braintree, Mass. Well, the lie detector determined that's a lie because this 911 call was from a caller in my jurisdiction in Rochester, and the call went to Northern 911 in Canada. And this was one of the first ones we received from Northern 911 in Canada, and it should have, which it did, make us go, why did that call go to Canada? This does not make sense, does not compute. So number one, we need to fill out a discrepancy report for that situation because the call was routed somewhere it did not belong. And so I'm going to break down what happened here. So number one, because the phone, the address on the alley was for Braintree, but the caller was physically located in Rochester, the phone system got a little confused. So let's look at the visual. So 911 call gets placed. Okay. Does the call go to Rochester? No, because the Annie and Alley is saying Braintree. So do we send the call to Braintree? No, because the physical location of the caller is in Rochester. So instead of the network sending the call to the wrong location, and it can't not send the call through, it says, I'm not going to send it to Rochester or Braintree. I'm going to default route it to an emergency call relay center, an ECRC. Okay. And I refer to ECRCs in this situation, the island of the misfit 911 calls. the call doesn't know where to go. There's a glitch in the system, something's wonky, and the call just doesn't know where to go, but it has to go somewhere. And a lot of times it just goes to Canada, right? So, where a lot of folks don't understand why this happens and it doesn't make sense to them, I just want to clarify something. So, again, before I move on to the next slide and clarify something about ECRCs, emergency call relay centers, I just want to go through the process again. 911 call gets placed, whether it is a cell phone that is not provisioned correctly, T-Mobile, Wi-Fi dialing, femtocells, small cells, multi-line telephone systems. If these phones are not provisioned correctly, when they place that 911 call, it doesn't know where to go. It doesn't know what to do. So it doesn't go to its intended destination because it doesn't know what the intended destination is. It will go to an emergency call relay center. Anytime you get a call from an emergency call relay center, that means that it was default routed for a reason. Your call should not be going to ECRCs. They are there as a default to catch the misfit 911 call, but they should not be going there. So you need to fill out a discrepancy report, okay? So I want to touch base on emergency call relay centers. And when the Canadian folks join us, I am going to make sure that they discuss a little bit about what happens in their Northern 911 facility. First and foremost, the folks in the Northern 911 Center and the Intrado Call Center are the folks that do the job that you do. They're just picking up your slack, not your slack intentionally, your slack by default. They have no choice but to catch our misfit 911 calls. So it infuriates me when I see in a chat group, nocturnal dispatchers, humanizing the headset, whatever it is, when somebody from the United States goes on there and says, hey, what's up with Northern 911? Why are we getting calls from them? And somehow, some way, those folks that are diligently doing the job, just like our 911 telecommunicators here, get a bad rap for absolutely no reason. Next time, try this. Hey, thanks for taking up the slack for my misfit 911 call, and cut them some slack because they're answering our calls. And now they are tasked with getting that call to the right place. And that can be challenging at best. Also, because they do their best to have all the numbers updated, and every once in a while, a number is going to be incorrect. So contact Northern 911, contact the Intrado call center in Colorado, and ask them, what number do you have on file for the Acme 911 center that if you should receive one of our calls, what number are you going to transfer it to? I did that, and I realized that the number they had was our business line number. I immediately changed it to our alternate emergency number, which is a 24/7 number that does not go through recording. And we fixed that before it was a problem. So definitely make sure that you have a full understanding of what those heroes are doing, because they're doing the same job that you do. They're just doing it from a different place. So there's that. So we're going to do one more little section, and then we're going to wrap up for this session. But it goes with this, so I'm not going to stop and then have to pick it back up. So there is a NENA technical standard document. It's a technical standard document. It doesn't mean that it's a NENA standard. It's more of an educational document on resolving Annie and Allie discrepancies and no record found, NRFs. Here is the location where you can find this standard document. It will be in the PDF. You can just click on it and go there. A lot of folks, as I said, I talk a lot about discrepancy reporting because I have a huge passion for multi-line telephone systems and them getting misrouted on a regular basis. The problem is that folks are not being trained how to file discrepancy reporting. Now, discrepancy reporting is on the body of knowledge, so it ties in well here. And this is the document in which they're getting information from. As to what's on the exam, I don't know, but we're going to break it down a little bit. As far as discrepancy reporting goes, this is an old form that we had in our 911 center a long time ago. Majority of them, if not all of them, are accessible through your phone system. If any of the information on the screen in front of you is incorrect, incorrect name, incorrect community. If it is a misrouted call, meaning a true misrouted call, a true misrouted call is a multi-line phone system that goes to Northern 911 or Intrado, a wireless call that goes to Northern 911 or the Intrado call center, or it is sent to another jurisdiction 3 towns away. What is a normal misrouted call, or what appears to be a misrouted call, is if I'm right on the line and it hits somebody else's tower and that call goes to the neighbor's house, well, that's how the system is supposed to work. It's when it's 2-3 towns away that somebody else is transferring me a call that belongs in my jurisdiction. And if that's the case, a red flag needs to go up. Why did that call go to them? But what's happening today is folks are getting the information, they're handling the call, and then they're doing this because everybody's happy. But we have to report any misrouted calls. No record found. How many times have you seen on your screen, there's no record found? That is a discrepancy. Somewhere in the system, the Annie and the Allie got lost, and that's a problem. Incorrect DSN numbers. So if we're not taking care of this situation, then we're putting somebody in jeopardy. The purpose of this standard is to standardize Annie and Allie trouble and specifically no record found reporting to facilitate a timely resolution. An Annie Allie trouble is defined as wrong Annie Allie, no Annie, or an Allie discrepancy, including but not limited to no record found. So as you can see up on this Zetron Max call, this was from an agency when I was at Rapid SOS. This is when they thought it was super cool that in the network, in the 911 system, the call came in, no record found. There is nothing on that screen. There's no map, there's no phone number, there's no nothing, but there's a caller on the other side that needs help. And they wanted to show the profound example of why they need to be signed into the Rapid SOS portal and using jurisdiction view, because on this call and the following call after it, they were 2 back-to-back no record found calls. The information was shown on the Rapid SOS portal. The director just happened to see these 2 particular calls back to back and wanted to know, why do we have 2 calls coming in with no record found? A discrepancy report gets filled out on both of them, and they determined that there was a problem with the tower that was supposed to be delivering these calls. So if we're not filling out the discrepancy form or doing something about no record found, then you're putting yourself in a liable situation, right? You know there's a problem. Standards say that if there is something wonky with the way that call is delivered to you, then you need to get it resolved. So if you don't know whether or not you have them, you need to find out. Sending an email to a supervisor is not the best solution. There's a lot of agencies that this is what they do. If there's something wrong with the way the call went through, they send an email to the supervisor. Supervisor may or may not send it to the director. Director may or may not do something with it. I highly encourage you to go back to your phone systems and find where the discrepancy reporting inside the system lives. And I'm going to show you a few of those in just a second. Make sure you know what you're looking for. The incorrect address, the incorrect DSN, the true misrouted call. What are the things that need to be reported? Who are you reporting it to? So if I fill out that form, sometimes, so here in Massachusetts, if I was to fill out that form on my CallWorks, hit the button, it's going to go to the state 911 department automatically. The way it used to be was we would hit the button, fill it out, and then they would send it to, it would come out to my office. It would be printed in my office, and then I would manually submit it. So either way, where is it going? When I hit the button, where is it going and who's responsible for it? And then it needs to be documented. Do you know why it should be documented? Because if there's ever an issue, which there have been issues of calls getting misrouted, and 2 that I can specifically think of where children have died. And 1, the call went to Northern 911 in Canada, and the other one went to a Colorado call center. So I'm not going to break those apart, but this is why it should be reported, because the question now is, was this ever a situation? Did this ever happen before? And did that call go to Northern 911 before, and we never did anything about it? And why is it so important? For that reason right there. So what are things that we need to report? Now, I have on here a 911 area code. Now, before folks get all squirrely, there's a little star there. If you are using the Rapid SOS portal and you are on jurisdiction view, and you know that there are times that on my network, it shows a 911 area code call, but there is, in fact, an actual working phone on the other side of it because the Rapid SOS portal is showing me a phone number and a location. My folks, if I was still in the center, they would be filling out a discrepancy report for that. If I ask the caller what number they're calling me from and they give me an actual phone number, but the alley is showing 911, then, and we're going to talk more about non-service initialized devices in a little bit. There are true NSI calls where the phone is a disconnected cell phone, and then there are imposters. They come through the system as a disconnected cell phone, but they are not in fact a disconnected cell phone. So if it's coming through the system and you see it on your Rapid SOS, or they give you a phone number and they are on that phone right now, then a discrepancy report should be filled out. If there's an alley discrepancy, the address is incorrect, the ESN number is incorrect, there's no Annie, otherwise it says no record found or true misrouted calls. So just a quick overview on the Viper system, it's the alley with the X, like bad alley. On CallWorks, it's down here, alley discrepancy. And I say put them through the system because you want to keep track of how many times this is happening. On the Zetron Max, it's going to be up here in the right-hand corner of the alley screen. The Vesta 911, it is down here. It says incorrect location. And then I'm just going to use this one as an example, this incorrect location here. Once you open it, it backfills all the information in there. And I was given permission from Baldwin County to use this as an example because I do think it's really important to show folks what it looks like. So 911 call gets placed, and I'm going to use this as an example. So again, 911 call gets placed, information is incorrect, we bring it up. So caller advised the address needed 15 Hospital Road. Okay, so there was it was misrouted to the wrong place. So insufficient, incorrect location information. And then here is another example. Baldwin County does it right when it comes to discrepancies. They are on top of it. So in this particular case, there's a couple things. So number one, this location right here, this is the incorrect name. So this facility is called Sunchase, not Pool. So this is incorrect. The name of the facility is supposed to be there. So that needs to get fixed. That could make or break whether or not the responders get to the right location, right? So if you've ever driven down on Gulf Shores, you know, there's a bazillion facilities and condos, etc. So having the name of the facility is supposed to be there. So that's incorrect. They want all of the directions spelled out, not just a W, not just an E, because it can get lost in the shuffle. And then update the comments. Anytime there is something specific that can be added to a record, like in Rochester, we have 2 addresses that you have to actually go out of town for and come back. And so 2 New Bedford Road is one of those addresses. You actually have to drive into another town, down another road, and then back to get to this particular address. So when they placed the 911 call and we're trying to figure this out, we filled out a discrepancy and added the comment. So you can do that. And then we're going to wrap up with this one more tool that I'd like to put in your toolbox. The company that sent this call through, obviously it is a VoIP provider, and the name of the company is Envoy. And I've never heard of Envoy. I know that in my center, I had the phone numbers for AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, and Sprint. But I didn't have a phone number for Envoy or TRDO or LVL3 or BAND, or when Rapid SOS started with their silly little app, RSOS. There is a service provider database, so a company ID database that I want to give you as a 911 tool in your toolbox. If you are not familiar with the NINA company ID search, head on over to, and you can just type in to your web browser, cid.nina.org, and it's going to bring you to the National Emergency Number Association, the NINA company ID search. You can now take that 4-letter code, whether it's Sprint, Verizon, AT&T, LVL3, Envoy, SPPCS, RSOS, whoever sends that call to you, they have to have a company ID registered. And so in this case, when I typed Envoy in, Envoy, it will give me the 24/7 NOC number, the Network Operations Center. It is really important that you guys have access to this on your desktop because there's going to come a day like that little round lady in the corner, the one that plays music and tells me what I have on my calendar and lets me know when my Amazon packages have been delivered. Today, she can't call 911, but there's going to come a day that she can. And if I say, hey, lady in the corner, call 911, you might see on that alley screen that AMZN transferred that call. And there's missing information and you need to contact them just like you would contact AT&T, Verizon, etc. This is the place where you're going to find that 24/7 number for AMZN. Okay. It's not there yet. I'm just using that as an example. More and more things are going to be calling 911 on our behalf. And you need to be able to know how to get in touch with that service provider very quickly. So this is a tool in your toolbox. So with that, we are going to wrap up, but here is my contact information. If you have any questions, want more information on any of the things that we talked about, usually I get a bunch of questions after this presentation on discrepancy reporting and the company ID, et cetera, and default routing, et cetera. So just scan that QR code right there. Quick contact can reach out to me quickly or shoot me an email at teldridge@onscenefirst.com. And I would appreciate if you followed me on social media. It helps me out with sponsorships when it comes to doing fun stuff like Telecommunicator Week. And if you are a first responder, down in the lower right-hand corner, the On Scene First Safe T-Net on Facebook is a safe place for us when it comes to mental health and wellness. So until next time, heroes, stay safe, stay strong, and stay here. We need you.